Story 1. Letting your child be disappointed sometimes teaches children to handle disappointment and helps build resilience. Story 2. Allowing children to experience discomfort and situations of conflict and confrontation helps them develop the necessary skills to process and navigate conflict. With your guidance before and correction after, they learn to compromise when necessary and resolve conflicts effectively. Story 3. Giving your children enough space to fail and then try to figure things out on their own is important. Many parents solve their children's problems without giving them a chance to find their own solutions. Story 4. Leaving your children alone for age-appropriate periods of time is important. At some point, children have to learn to entertain themselves or to be responsible for their own meals, depending on their age. The key part of that statement is age-appropriate. It also depends on how safe your neighborhood is. Story 5. Not being a helicopter parent means letting your children figure things out for themselves, not mediating every argument, and allowing them to have unsupervised but safe playtime with friends. Story 6. Making your kids help with chores from an early age teaches good habits and skills. When I grew up, we had a rule in my house. The person who cooks does not have to do the dishes. If you did not set the table and did not cook, you had to wash the dishes. Ironically, because of that, I became a really good cook because I hated doing dishes. So I learned how to cook everything. Story 7. Not encouraging children to clean their plates completely also applies to not forcing them to eat everything even if they serve themselves. Young children actually require much less food than most parents expect. But they do like to eat more frequently. Regularly forcing them to eat beyond their feelings of fullness can lead to long-lasting overeating. Story 8. Letting children engage in age-appropriate risky play is important. Trying to protect them from everything is poor parenting. Let them climb, run, jump, dig, and throw. They will become more spatially aware of their body, physically literate, and more active. A basic example: we taught our daughter to go up and down the stairs as soon as she started crawling at about 12 months. We always supervised when she was a baby. Once she was walking up and down the stairs was another skill we helped her learn. By the time she was 18 months old, we took the baby gate down. She was so confident on the stairs that we simply supervised whenever she went to the stairs, and only blocked the stairs when we were unable to supervise her, such as when cooking or cleaning while she played independently. My niece, on the other hand, has been continually discouraged from using the stairs because it is considered too dangerous. She is not allowed to use the stairs alone. She is 4 years old. She always has accidents around the stairs if she tries to go near them. She is developing typically and does not have special needs. Story 9. Not making your children share everything. No, you may not have their sandwich or their toy. Stop stealing under the guise of sharing. Story 10. Taking their teacher's side. Your child is being difficult. Yes, they are 6 years old, and yes, 6-year-olds are talkative. But there are 30 other 6-year-olds in the classroom, and if the teacher needs to come and tell you your child is talkative and disruptive, do something about it. Story 11. Gentle parenting has gained a bad reputation because some parents use it as an excuse to avoid disciplining their children. When done correctly, it means avoiding yelling at your children and clearly explaining why they should follow instructions, rather than simply scaring them into compliance. Story 12. My dad had a business in another town about 30 miles away. You had to change buses to reach there. He went there once a week to check accounts and distribute wages. When I was around 9 years old, he started taking me with him, and a year later, he trusted me to do it on my own. All I had to do was take the checks, catch a bus, then another, give them to the supervisor there, and bring back the accounts. I believe his trust in me to handle this on my own so early in my life greatly boosted my confidence. Story 13. Using logical consequences as learning experiences. Refuse to put on your coat to go to the playground? Then either we do not go to the playground or we go, and you get to be cold enough to be miserable while your warm siblings are running around playing. Story 14. Toddler leash. People side-eye it, but if your child is genuinely a runner, it is the leash or the middle of the street. Story 15. Many people think being open and honest with your children is not the best idea, but after being a teenage mother, I promised I would never avoid uncomfortable topics. We discuss everything at home at appropriate ages. I believe this created a safe space for my children to come to me when they have questions, issues, or if they make mistakes. I would rather they talk to me than hide things. Parents should talk to their children about human reproduction and ensure they have protection, birth control, or both. Story 16. Ignoring when your child is having a tantrum is important. As long as they are not hurting themselves, someone else, or destroying things, the best approach is to let them tire themselves out. Parents give in far too often, which teaches the child, "Oh, mom and dad will give me what I want. I just need to do this long enough." This leads to more tantrums in the future. Operant conditioning done inadvertently is difficult to undo. Please note there is a subtle but important difference between a tantrum and a meltdown. A tantrum is largely an attention-seeking behavior where the child wants something. A meltdown occurs when someone is overstimulated or overwhelmed sensory or emotionally and is trying to regulate themselves but having a hard time. The latter needs attention, care, and reassurance that they will be okay. Story 17. Allow your child to experience their emotions instead of urging them to be quiet immediately. Story 18. Let your children be bored in a child-friendly environment. For example, if you are home, you do not need to constantly keep them entertained because that will not teach them self-reliance nor foster opportunities for creativity. Story 19. For parents, it is beneficial not to make your children the highest priority all the time. Consciously plan and take the effort and time to prioritize your partner and yourself regularly. A happy, healthy relationship between parents is worth much more than the occasional inconvenience, missing the parents, or other opportunity costs these times may create for children. Story 20. Allowing your children to tell you they do not want to do certain things. Of course, they need to do their homework, but I am not forcing them to hug anyone, relatives or not. Their no should be respected. Story 21. Apologizing to your children when you are wrong, out of line, or letting your emotions control the way you interact with them. Story 22. Taking children to funerals. I understand, do not take them to every funeral when it is not relevant. However, a friend of mine was scolded for taking their 8-year-old to her grandfather's funeral. The grandfather had been living with them. Why would the child not be involved in mourning? It will scar the child more if they are not involved. Story 23. This may be controversial, but my mom gave me alcohol when I was 17. However, it was not to get me drunk. She realized I was going to college and did not know my limits, as I had never been drunk before. In Texas, where I am from, it is legal to let your children have a little at home. She wanted my first experience with alcohol to be safe and at home. She also took care of me during my hangover. At the time, I thought it was shocking that she condoned this, but I understood when I got to college. I knew several girls who had been sheltered like I was, and they became very intoxicated at their first party. A couple were sexually assaulted. I had the understanding to know my limit and recognize what being drunk was supposed to feel like versus being drugged. I am certain this knowledge saved me more than once. To be clear, I am not condoning giving shots to very young children, but safe and supervised drinking when a teenager is about to leave home can be helpful. It also made me comfortable opening up to my mom when I experimented with recreational drugs. I did not feel judged. The focus was entirely on my well-being. Story 24. Treating siblings differently in some ways. I do not mean having a favorite child and a scapegoat. I mean tailoring your parenting to the needs of individual children. One child might be ready for certain responsibilities at an earlier age than another. One might need more support for their social life than the other. I think you have to be open to changing that if it is causing feelings of unfairness. Overall, fair does not mean equal. Story 25. In general, making children do tasks they do not want to do is sometimes necessary. Whether that involves chores, maintaining regular attendance at school, keeping commitments, or similar responsibilities. Many people create an environment for their children of complete comfort and always getting their way. These children often grow up to be entitled adults because their concept of fairness becomes distorted. In their view, fairness means that everyone and everything is catered to their comfort all the time, which is not how life actually works. Story 26. Setting boundaries often looks like bad parenting but is good parenting. My toddler isn't allowed to kick down the door when I'm in the bathroom, but I know many other parents who let their kids follow them in. I've been criticized for locking the door and wanting privacy. But what if she needs something? What if an emergency happens? She just loves you. How can you be so cruel? This also applies to eating off my plate, treating me like a jungle gym, screaming at me, and more. I'm a mom, but I'm also a person with thoughts and feelings. Story 27. Severe disciplinary action is necessary for serious offenses. I am not referring to abuse, but to the removal of privileges. For example, my 14-year-old nephew was caught with heroin in his backpack. His parents had him drug tested, and he tested positive for opioids. They sent him to inpatient therapy for 30 days, followed by outpatient therapy that he will continue until further notice. They took away all his devices and prohibited all screen time for the summer. He had a full-time babysitter for the summer and was not allowed to leave the property. Without supervision. For entertainment, he was given many choices of non-screen-related hobbies, such as various arts and crafts and gardening, which my brother funded and supported. He was allowed to have select friends over on weekends, but only with supervision and still no screens. The rest of my family thought my brother was being too harsh and said, "Kids are going to experiment." Story 28. Letting your children suffer the consequences of their own actions helps them learn. We all learn from making mistakes. Story 29. Allowing them to experience boredom, giving them free time, teaching them how to use knives correctly and safely, and letting natural consequences be their teacher. Story 30. Not forcing your child to eat everything on their plate. Our rule is if you do not eat what we gave you, then instead of a sweet treat, you get a healthy alternative. On the other hand, if you eat at least half of your plate, you can have a dessert of your choice. But none of that "eat that or you starve" nonsense. Story 31. Standing by calmly while your child has a tantrum. From experience, I can say that many attempts at intervention in these moments only add fuel to the fire. Little children have big feelings and no coping skills to manage them. As parents, we teach our children those skills, but it takes time. It is not our job to handle our children's feelings. It is our job to teach them how to manage their own feelings. Story 32. Teaching children that it is okay not to share their belongings, but also that it is okay if others do not share with them, is important. Do you walk up to a friend with a luxury car and say, "It is my turn now. Give me the keys"? No, unless you are a carjacker, you do not. This can be done tactfully, though, and I think that is the part some parents miss. Communal toys are communal. I am strictly speaking about personal property. I always asked my child to put away any toys she did not want to share before playdates, and I guided her so that if she wanted to share, she would, which was most of the time. But also, if her friend did not want to share, she should drop it and move on. I did not want her to grow up with a sense of entitlement, like, "I am entitled to use your property solely because I am here with you." Also, and this one really bothers me when people make nasty comments about it, leaving an item that you absolutely need to get into work in the back seat with your baby before leaving the house for daycare drop-off. People might say, "You care about your purse, phone, or key fob more than your child. You should not be a parent." No, I have a healthy mistrust of my own sleep-deprived brain that has gone on autopilot more than once, driving past a turn I had to make because I would usually be going straight, well before being in charge of a helpless infant. Of course, I am not going to trust my fallible human brain. I obviously love my child more than anything else in this world. Having a breastfed baby, I was the one up all night with feedings, working 9 hours a day, and doing the drop-offs and pickups. I was aware that one minor change in routine could result in a hot car death. So yes, I put my key fob to get into the building in my back seat with the infant seat, which ensured my child would potentially only be alone in the car for the 25 or so steps from my designated parking spot to the employee entrance. It never happened, but I felt much more secure knowing I had that safety net. I also told my daycare provider to call me if my child did not show up and I had not told her I was off work. She called once in the 5 years my daughter was in daycare, but she had forgotten I told her my company was closed for a minor holiday. I have personally been called a bad parent who cares more about objects than her child for this several times, but it is quite the opposite, and I will stand firm on this. Story 33. I have been reading studies about overpraising leading to narcissistic traits in children. Essentially, telling a child they are the best at everything and not providing enough reprimand. These children struggle to accept feedback or criticism and believe they are better than others. They cannot admit when they have behaved poorly and often turn out selfish. Story 34. Not buying them everything they ask for, especially not 150-pound shoes, 80-pound belts, and 100-pound t-shirts. I know parents worry their kids will get picked on, but why spend so much money on things that are passing trends and no better than clothing that is 75% cheaper? It is all about brands these days, and I think it is unwise and a bad lesson to teach your kids. Story 35. Locking children in the cube of torment for 9 seconds is unacceptable. Any longer is harmful parenting. Story 36. Letting your children say the proper names for genitalia, such as penis, vagina, anus, and testicles, is important. Using proper names instead of cute names like my special spot helps protect them. Statistics show that children are less likely to be targets of sexual abuse if they use proper names. I have worked with abused children, and predators can evade justice because terms like my special spot can be misunderstood in court. Story 37. Not really bad parenting per se, but talk to your kids with an adult voice, not baby talk. It might sound a bit cold at the time because most parents try to keep it light and fun for their children with a baby talk voice. However, when children start speaking, they will be more familiar with sentence structure and have better pronunciation if they are not used to words sounding like this. Story 38. Letting their children express themselves is beneficial. It is important to allow children to share their feelings and teach them how to manage those feelings appropriately. I always felt like I was going to explode from keeping everything inside, but I grew up in a family where I had to carefully control my tone. Anything I said had to be carefully crafted and spoken in a calm voice, because showing any frustration would result in being shut down. Story 39. My family does not like that I taught my children the correct names for their genitals. Story 40. Giving children space to explore, fail, experience minor play-related injuries, and generally engage with reality within age-appropriate guidelines is essential. Early and ongoing development require gradually encountering the challenges of reality to develop obstacle avoidance skills and self-esteem that arise from overcoming new and difficult situations. Learning occurs at the edges of what is known, and growth happens at the edges of familiarity. By definition, this is not a completely safe environment. Smooth seas do not make a good sailor. Story 41. Allowing your children to talk back. I put that in quotes because 99% of the time, children are not trying to be rude or disrespectful. They either genuinely do not understand something or feel strongly that something is unfair. Sure, they might need correction on how to voice their concerns, but from experience, letting children question authority and actually listening to them, without necessarily giving in to everything they want, goes a long way in building a healthy, mutually respectful relationship. Saying, "because I said so," is insulting to a child's intelligence. If you treat their perspective and concerns with respect and actually explain your reasoning, your child will be much more likely to listen and follow your rules. I have always validated my children's questions with explanations, and as a result, I enjoy an amazing relationship with each of them. They trust me and come to me immediately with problems because they know I will listen. Story 42. When my son, Mike, asks for a Pepsi, I give it to him. Just one Pepsi. Story 43. I will be criticized for this, but I do not care. Making your children get up and go to school, starting in kindergarten, is important. I cannot believe the number of people who just cannot wake their children because their little bodies need rest, and they just cannot handle a school day. They come home exhausted after the first day, or they cannot let their sweet, precious child leave the house for 6 whole hours. I am not talking about children who are legitimately not ready for kindergarten. Parents seem determined to keep their children as babies for as long as possible, and that is not a good thing. Story 44. My mother-in-law hates it when she calls wanting to see our children, and instead of just telling them, You are at Nana's tomorrow. We actually ask them whether or not they want to see her. If they say no, the answer is no. In her mind, it is as simple as she wants to see them, so she orders them to see her. That does not fly with me. Story 45. I've received a lot of criticism for this, but here you go. Let your kids get bored. Let them feel like they have nothing to do. Constantly stimulating your child's senses will make them rely on outside influence to stay entertained and prevent their imagination from expanding as it should. Let them get so bored that they make a spaceship out of a cardboard box. Let them be so bored with their current toys that they find new ways to play with them. Let them ask you about things beyond what you think their play level should be, like power tools or sewing. Let them experiment and learn. Similarly, leave your kids alone sometimes. Do not hover over them. Sometimes don't even let them know you're watching. Your child may be doing something you've been trying to teach for a while. Don't praise them mid-task. This can teach your child that only starting tasks is rewarded. Let them finish and concentrate. One of the worst things you can do is interrupt their focus. Let your child struggle. Let them not understand how things work until they ask for help. This is more applicable when they have more basic speech skills. My son was 2.5 years old when I started doing this. Now he's almost 3 and only asks for help when he truly needs it. All of these things will help your child gain autonomy to live a healthy life outside of your care. Story 46. I have had many people tell me that not spanking my child is bad parenting, but he is doing great so far. I will never be convinced that I should hit my child for any reason. Story 47. Allowing children as young as 8 years old to explore outside on their own without supervision. Story 48. Being okay with not doing extracurricular activities if it is just not your child's interest. There are plenty of other ways to intentionally meet the developmental needs. Story 49. Allowing your children to explore independently promotes confidence and communication skills. Hovering only creates anxiety and hinders their development. Story 50. When my daughter was 16, we gave her a car and no curfew. I am sure everybody thought we were crazy, but we knew our daughter was mature, and we wanted her to have freedom while we were still there in case she needed us. Unlike when she got to college and did not know how to handle it. Story 51. Saying no and sticking to it regardless of the meltdown. Story 52. Those leash backpacks for toddlers. It is one thing if the parent is just using it to drag a child around. However, when used correctly, it is a great tool for toddlers to begin walking on their own in public areas while ensuring they do not wander off too far. Toddlers are very good at disappearing suddenly. Story 53. Teaching children to clean up after themselves, cook occasionally, do their laundry and ironing. In general, fostering independence from a young age. Story 54. Whatever aggravates people who are not parents. To individuals without children, virtues like patience and problem-solving skills appear to be signs of indifference or lack of discipline. Story 55. Discipline involves telling your child no and setting behavioral boundaries. Story 56. Teaching your child to clean their room. Anything can be taken too far, obviously, but this new generation of parents who clutch their pearls and say that is their private space. Thank you, your children's future partners will have to be their parents. Every child should be taught personal responsibility. Story 57. If their basic needs are met, ignoring a tantrum is far more effective than feeding it by doting on them or giving in to what they want. Story 58. Prioritizing significant time for a romantic relationship. Children benefit from not always being the center of attention and from seeing healthy adult connections. Story 59. Letting children get bored. Filling your child's schedule so full they cannot breathe will lead to young adults who have no sense of self, cannot do things independently, and cannot handle solitude. It also causes burnout. You will burn them out. Let them spend time bored on a summer day. Do not sign them up for every possible activity. Story 60. Having children express disagreement and negotiate respectfully with their parents is acceptable. It is a valuable life skill that teaches them to share their views confidently and compromise. It also helps them become more comfortable with rejection if they fail. For example, if they are night owls, you can listen to their arguments and discuss concerns such as the amount of sleep they are getting, self-control late at night, and differences between weekdays and weekends. Story 61. Not hitting your children is important. From my experience with both family and others, you should not hit your kids. If you would not hit your spouse, parents, or elderly people, why would you hit a child? It makes no sense. Hitting teaches them fear and normalizes violence as a way to get your way. It also causes aggression. Not hitting your kids is good parenting. Story 62. Not beating your children. Any form of beating, including spanking, is scientifically known to have harmful effects and is abusive. It usually seeks control and rarely solves the underlying problem. Many people criticize gentle parenting and claim children need to be beaten. Speak to them for a while, and you realize they have no idea what gentle parenting is. They confuse it with permissive parenting. They also believe that children who need to be beaten are those who experience permissive parenting. In reality, many troublemakers and bullies at school have been beaten excessively. The underlying issue often relates to emotional management and communication. Tasks like cleaning up after yourself can be taught in ways that make the process enjoyable, especially if children have a positive relationship with their parents from a young age. Many people say they want to do better than their parents. The reality is that many of us lack the emotional maturity needed to raise children. We may see toddlers as selfish, ungrateful, and unresponsive, but that is how children at that age typically behave. Beating only forces them to suppress their emotions, leaving parents unaware of what is wrong and how to help. Story 63. On Reddit, not being your child's best friend is important. You are their parent and need to set boundaries at times. However, some people believe that if you give your child room to grow, teach them, and occasionally disagree with them, you are a bad parent. Parents should not be friends with their children until they are adults. They are supposed to be guardians, teachers, and raise their children with love and morals. Story 64. Letting your 8-year-old walk or bike to school alone is perfectly normal in Europe but considered child abuse or neglect in the United States. Story 65. Telling your kids no about anything. My daughter is 4. We do not let her drink soda and make her sit at the table to eat, as opposed to watching videos. My wife's entire family criticizes me all the time. In fact, this weekend, her cousin, who's 15-year-old, daughter is 21 according to her social media, posts pictures in her bra, and stays out all night, told me that you cannot say no to girls because it upsets them. This happened at dinner in front of the entire family while I was trying to get my daughter to eat. I have never raised my voice with my kids, but I am stern when needed. Oddly, they all constantly lose their cool and yell at their kids. Story 66. Not allowing a small child to have an iPad, phone, or any access to the internet is sometimes seen as strict or no-fun parenting. Parents who do not allow internet access are actually responsible because the internet is not a safe place for a child to explore. Regarding chores, teaching children how to wash dishes is not harmful. It helps them learn essential skills for adulthood. Story 67. Giving your teenagers access to sexual protection and birth control, as well as allowing them to talk to you when they have experimented with substances. They are going to do these things whether they are allowed to or not, so you might as well give them the avenue of communication to help guide them through the emotions and decision-making. Story 68. Shared with me by my lovely therapist. I hope that if I ever become a parent one day, I can learn to block out the judgmental attitudes of onlookers should I ever end up in a situation like this with my child. Story 69. Letting them struggle sometimes allows them to figure something out on their own and take pride in their accomplishment. For example, when they cannot solve a puzzle, do not jump in and solve it for them. Give them time to figure it out. Story 70. Letting your children do slightly dangerous activities, such as using playground equipment that is designed for older kids or helping you prepare dinner, can be beneficial. It is important to allow children to push their boundaries and learn their own limits. As long as it does not cause permanent harm, a scrape or some tears from trying the monkey bars is not a bad thing. Story 71. Letting them cry when they are upset. Letting them be angry. Just let them. They are entitled to their feelings, and I don't need to tell them they shouldn't feel a certain way. Story 72. A lot of people think gentle parenting is bad, but it is very well supported by developmental science. Story 73. Letting your child fall and get mildly injured. Bruised elbow? Scraped knee? Get up and keep playing. Story 74. The backpack or harness leashes. It looks silly and dehumanizing to some people, and they make a fuss over you not being able to control your child. In reality, it is dangerous out here with kidnappers and pedophiles. The child might be a runner and scare you in a big crowd. Imagine your toddler running off at Disney World. They may be curious to find frogs or fish at the creek and not be aware of how slippery the rock they are standing on is. If I had children, they would absolutely be on a bag leash or harness. Keeps them safe and gives you peace of mind. Anything that can happen has happened when people looked away from their child for a split second. Story 75. Let your child learn to experience boredom instead of constantly giving them a screen. They may scream at first, but over time they will adjust. Story 76. Childhood innocence is thoroughly overrated. I am not saying you need to traumatize a child, but from the age of 8, I think it is a good idea to educate them about the reality of the world. Teach them about war, evil, the Holocaust, nuclear weapons, how politics actually work, and so on. Childhood innocence is a glorified form of ignorance, and I maintain that ignorance is a categorically undesirable trait to have. It should be ruthlessly removed from the mind of a child as soon as possible so that they can approach the rest of their life with the maturity and understanding needed to face any problem or dilemma. Story 77. Breaking generational curses by educating your children on what they did wrong instead of beating them and claiming it is discipline. If a child is too young to understand their mistake, then they are too young to understand why they are being hit. You can discipline your children without inflicting harm on them, and anyone who argues otherwise is an abuser in disguise. Many people who are parents should not be parents because they have not unpacked their unhealed trauma. Instead of exercising patience and taking time to educate their children on what is right and wrong, they immediately resort to violence because that is how they were punished as children. They either do not recognize, care, or refuse to acknowledge that there are ways to discipline children without hurting them. People who claim they were beaten as children and turned out fine are not as fine as they believe, because if that were true, they would understand that no logical person would feel the need to punish a child by harming them. It baffles me that some people believe it is appropriate to hit children for wrongdoings instead of educating them, then proceed to blame mental illness and other related issues contributing to a child's unruliness on them not being beaten. I do not want children but have great respect for parents who raise their children with kindness, grace, and understanding. Story 78. Correcting children when they make social mistakes in front of others is important. The feeling of humiliation, immediately replaced with love and safety, is a gift to your child. It is better than allowing them to develop poor manners and letting society deal with the consequences. The high-pitched screeching that is sometimes tolerated comes from children learning this behavior from peers who are socially behind. These children influence the behavior of your kids when gentle discipline does not succeed. Story 79. Permitting children to be bored is important. Children need mental downtime for play, curiosity, self-exploration, and creativity. We often overschedule children, thinking we are exposing them to a variety of experiences, but they need time to process and to learn tolerance for being alone or not constantly catered to. Story 80. Helping with chores was valuable. I learned how to do tasks early on, which helped me a lot. My brother did not need to do chores, and now as an adult, he does not know how to sweep, mop, do laundry, wash dishes, or vacuum. It is really important to teach your children how to do chores. Story 81. Let them make decisions to build their confidence. Some adults have a problem with that. Story 82. Watching your child make a different choice than you wanted, knowing how it will end, but allowing them to fail or experience heartbreak. Letting children solve their problems among themselves, without allowing you or other parents to fix it for them. Story 83. Leaving your children alone without giving them money to spend. Story 84. Correcting someone in public, in front of people who are not their parents. Story 85. We don't bathe or shower our children every night. It seems like our friends all do. If my children are dirty or ask for a bath, we give them one for sure. They are 3 and 5 years old and aren't sweating. I also think it is bad for their skin and hair if they are washed too often. Story 86. Not indoctrinating your children into a religion when they are young, and then allowing them to form their own beliefs as they mature. Story 87. Knocking on your kid's door and asking permission before taking anything that belongs to them. I get a bit of flack from friends and family on this one. They think that since it's my home and I bought the items, I should help myself, but I'm trying to teach my child boundaries. What is his, and others need to ask before using it. What belongs to others is theirs, and you need permission to take it. So far, it has worked beautifully. When Dad took his snacks, he carefully and firmly told Dad he needed permission, and he was right. I was so proud. He always asks before borrowing my stuff and always gives it back unless I say he can keep it. Story 88. Teaching them how to drink when they are teenagers is important. I am not suggesting teaching them how to get extremely intoxicated. Teach them what it feels like to have 2 beers, maybe a third. Teach them their limit so that when they turn 18 and go out drinking, they do not do dangerous things. My parents never gave me alcohol. I went to a party when I was 16 and got so drunk I cannot explain. I was more drunk than I have ever seen anyone else. More drunk than I have ever been since. I went too hard and now I struggle with drinking. Please just teach them how to drink responsibly. Story 89. It is generally considered poor parenting when people say they do not physically discipline their children. However, I argue that most children do what they see and hear. This means a child's good and bad behavior comes from the people they are around the most. I believe it is abusive to punish a child for being disrespectful when their parents display disrespectful behavior. A child may get angry when told to do something, but have you considered your own reaction when asked to do something you do not want to do? I believe it is my duty to equip myself with the information I need to teach my children important lessons. My inability to deliver a message is my responsibility, not my child's. Story 90. Letting your children swear is acceptable. Teach them not to use offensive language maliciously, and do not shield them from reality. This advice comes from someone whose mother tried to hide how difficult the world can be. Story 91. Allowing children to experience boredom stimulates creativity and imagination. Story 92. De-escalation. The heat of the moment is not the time to issue punishment or consequences. Instead, it prevents a problematic situation from escalating further until it explodes. This applies to teachers as well. It can appear as weakness to an outside observer. Story 93. Saying no when it is appropriate and maintaining that boundary is important. Gentle parenting does not mean allowing your child to do whatever they want or never having any consequences for misbehavior. I see many parents who just give in, and then they wonder why their child caregiver or teacher raises concerns. Story 94. It is probably not considered bad, but it does not happen enough. Giving young children aged 5 and older simple independence. For example, letting them dress themselves. No one cares if the colors clash, as long as the right areas are covered. Or placing acceptable snacks within their reach that they can grab and open themselves. Children are much more capable than we give them credit for if they are given the tools and opportunity. Story 95. Telling children that not every adult should be obeyed. Story 96. Not making your child share things. I do not make my son share anything. He is allowed to say no, and he does not have to share anything he does not want to. Other people are not entitled to my son's belongings. Just as sharing as an adult is optional, sharing as a child should be optional too. Story 97. Leashes. People who put leashes on their toddlers are often portrayed as lazy parents who cannot keep an eye on their children. However, kidnappings happen frequently, and having a physical tether to prevent someone from snatching a child is smart. Story 98. I do not mean in a permissive way, but just being kind to your children. Many people think treating your children kindly and nicely is bad parenting, but it is absolutely what you should do. I am not saying you have to be their best friend or ignore when they have done something wrong, but you should at least try to be someone they like and want to spend time with. Story 99. Teaching your children how to deal with boredom is important. They do not need a screen in front of them every second. If their children ever have children, their attention span may be shorter than that of a goldfish with memory loss. Story 100. Being relatively lenient. Many parents have strict rules that do not teach children to follow rules but to bypass them. Story 101. Refusing to help your teenager so they gain independence. I am talking about situations that teach them resilience and the ability to tackle problems they can solve on their own. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.